It is the 1st century before Christ. The Roman Republic is not an empire yet, but it acts like one. Its legions are the absolute, undisputed masters of the Mediterranean. They believe they are invincible, unstoppable, a force ordained by the gods themselves. But far to the east, in the endless sands of the desert, a shadow is growing, a shadow they never saw coming. And at the heart of that shadow is a woman, a queen Rome would later try so desperately to erase from history, they almost succeeded. This is the story of the warrior queen who looked the world's only superpower in the eye and did not blink. Presentational, but still deeply engaging tone. Welcome back to The Past Unfolded. We scour the archives to find the stories that time forgot, the figures that history tried to bury, and today, we begin one of the most dramatic tales of defiance the ancient world ever witnessed. We all know the names of Rome's great enemies, Hannibal, Spartacus, Vercingetorix, but history, written overwhelmingly by the victors, often sidelines its most formidable female adversaries. This story isn't about Cleopatra of Egypt. Her story, while incredible, is well-trodden ground. This is about another queen, from a kingdom far more mysterious and powerful than you've likely been taught. Her name was Zenobia. And her ambition didn't just threaten a Roman legion or two, it threatened to shatter the entire eastern flank of the Roman Empire and rewrite the destiny of the ancient world. To understand Zenobia, you must first understand her home, not a backwater province, not a tribe of desert nomads. You must picture the ancient equivalent of Singapore, Dubai, and Wall Street, all rolled into one stunning marble-clad city in the middle of nowhere. This is Palmyra. The name itself means City of Palms. It was an oasis of impossible wealth, a glittering jewel planted in the heart of the most brutal desert. But its real power wasn't its water, it was its location. Palmyra sat directly on the Silk Road, the superhighway of the ancient world. Every spice from India, every bolt of silk from China, every piece of incense destined for a Roman temple, it all flowed through Palmyra. The Palmyrines became the masters of logistics, of tariffs, of protection. They built a merchant empire on sand, and it made them staggeringly rich and fiercely independent. And this independence is key. Palmyra was a client state of Rome. Officially, it was part of the empire. But in reality, it was a buffer zone, a critical ally between Rome and its mortal enemy to the east, the powerful and equally formidable Persian Empire. The Palmyrines walked a delicate tightrope. They adopted some Roman customs, enjoyed the protection of the Roman peace, but fiercely maintained their own identity, their own gods, their own Aramaic language. They were a cultural fusion, a blend of Arab, Greek, Roman, and Persian influences. They were, in every sense, their own masters. But this delicate balance was about to be shattered. In the year 260 AD, a seismic event rocked the ancient world. The Roman Emperor, Valerian, a proud and powerful man, marched east to deal with the Persian threat once and for all. He met the Persian king, Shapur I, at the Battle of Edessa, and it was an unmitigated catastrophe. The Roman army was annihilated. It was the most crushing military defeat Rome had suffered in centuries. And in its horrifying aftermath, Emperor Valerian was not just killed, he was captured, taken alive as a prisoner of war. Let that sink in. The single most powerful man on earth, the Emperor of Rome, was now a trophy in the dungeon of a Persian king. The unthinkable had happened. The invincible legions were proven vulnerable. The entire Roman East was plunged into chaos, leaderless, and utterly exposed. The Persian army was now free to march west, with nothing to stop them. Rome was on the verge of a total collapse in the east. The eagle was wounded, bleeding, and looking into the abyss. And in the silent, watching city of Palmyra, a power vacuum had opened up. A vacuum wide enough for a kingdom to rise and for a queen to step into. At the head of Palmyra was a man named Odenathus, a shrewd and powerful lord who had been loyal to Rome, but with Emperor Valerian gone, His allegiance was now to his city, to his people, and then, suddenly, Odaenathus was murdered, assassinated under mysterious circumstances along with his heir. Was it the Romans? The Persians? A family rival? The truth was buried in the sand, just another mystery of the desert. What remained was a throne, drenched in blood, and left sitting on it was Odaenathus's widow, his second wife, a woman believed by many to be a descendant of none other than Cleopatra herself, a woman fluent in Egyptian and Greek, a patron of philosophers, and, as would soon be discovered, a brilliant military strategist. Her name was Septimia Zenobia, and she was left not just with a city to rule, but with a young son to protect, in a world that was literally falling apart around her. What would you do? The most powerful army in the world is defeated. A savage enemy is massing on your border. Your husband is dead. Your city's wealth is a target for every scavenger and conqueror for 1,000 miles. Most would have pleaded for mercy. Most would have tried to cut a deal. But Zenobia was not most people. In part 2, we will watch as the widow becomes a general, as the queen becomes a conqueror. We will follow her army as it does the one thing no one believed was possible. It takes the fight directly to the Persians. And then, it turns towards Rome itself. This is not just history. This is a thriller. The Roman East is in flames. The emperor is a prisoner of Persia. The legions are shattered. And in the wealthy, independent city of Palmyra, a king is dead, murdered, leaving his widow, Queen Zenobia, alone with a son, a throne, and a world collapsing around her. The wolves are at the door. The greatest empire on earth and its most savage enemy are both circling. One wrong move, and her city, her legacy, her very life will be wiped from the desert sands. Conventional wisdom said to kneel, to negotiate, to survive. But Zenobia, she did not listen to conventional wisdom. Welcome back to The Past Unfolded. This is part 2 of our story of Queen Zenobia. When we last left her, the situation was beyond dire. It was apocalyptic. But what most historians miss is that within that crisis lay a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The old order was gone. The rules were being rewritten. And Zenobia held a pen. She wasn't just going to protect her son's inheritance, she was going to build him an empire. Zenobia's first move was a masterstroke of political genius. She didn't declare independence. She didn't side with Persia. Instead, she did the one thing that was utterly respectable, utterly defensible, and utterly ambitious. She declared herself the regent for her young son, Valerian, and she proclaimed that they were acting on behalf of Rome. Think about that. Rome was leaderless, its authority in tatters. So Zenobia simply picked it up. She positioned herself and her late husband's loyal Palmyran army as the last bastion of Roman order in the east, the only force that could possibly stand against the Persian tide. It was a fiction, of course, a beautiful, brilliant fiction, and Rome, weak and distracted by its own civil wars hundreds of miles away, could do nothing but reluctantly accept it. For now, she had her mandate. Now, she needed to prove her power, and so the scholar, the widow, the patron of philosophers, became a general. She assembled her army, a formidable fusion of Roman legionary tactics and the unmatched desert cavalry of the East, and she marched, not to defend, to attack. Her first target? The Persians, the very army that had just humiliated Rome. Zenobia's forces crossed the Euphrates River, the ancient boundary of the Roman world, and marched deep into Persian territory, and she won. She avenged the captured Emperor Valerian by pushing the mighty King Shapur back, reclaiming lost Roman territory, and not so incidentally, securing the lucrative trade routes for Palmyra. The message was deafening. Where Rome had failed catastrophically, a Palmyrene queen had succeeded, but Zenobia wasn't finished. The taste of victory was sweet. The ambition, now awakened, was insatiable. She turned her gaze west. With the Roman presence still in disarray, she began to secure Rome's provinces for them. One by one, they fell to her armies, almost without a fight. Syria was already hers. Then came Arabia Petraea, and then the crown jewel, the breadbasket of the entire Roman Empire, Egypt. the legendary Roman province, the source of its grain, its wealth, its history. A Palmyrene army on the orders of a desert queen marched into Alexandria and raised her banner. For the first time since Cleopatra, a foreign ruler controlled Egypt, and this time she had taken it by force. In less than 5 years, Zenobia had done the impossible. She had carved out an empire of her own. From the sands of Palmyra, she now ruled over most of the Roman East. She controlled the Silk Road and the grain supply of Rome. She minted coins with her son's image and her own, alongside that of the Roman emperor, a symbolic claim of equality. She was no longer a regent, she was an empress. But in Rome, a new emperor had finally risen from the chaos. A hard, military man named Aurelian, and he had spent the last few years reuniting the shattered pieces of the West. And, as he looked east, he did not see an ally holding the line. He did not see a regent for Rome. He saw a usurper, a rebel, a kingdom that had grown far too powerful, led by a woman who had dared to seize the very heart of Roman power. The fiction was over. The gamble had paid off, and now the bill was about to come due. Zenobia had built her empire. She had achieved the unthinkable. But in doing so, she had created something Rome could no longer ignore. Emperor Aurelian, the man who would earn the title Restitutor Orbis, restorer of the world, now turned his full, furious attention to the east. The full, brutal might of the reformed Roman legions began to march. Their destination, Palmyra. Their target, Zenobia. In Part 3, the two titans clash. The brilliant, ambitious queen of the desert against the grim, determined restorer of Rome. It will be a campaign of brilliance, desperation, and earth-shattering consequences. The fate of an empire hangs in the balance. She dared to build an empire. From the ashes of Rome's defeat, Queen Zenobia carved a kingdom that stretched from the deserts of Persia to the Nile of Egypt. She controlled the world's trade and its breadbasket. She minted coins with her face beside the Roman emperors. It was the ultimate act of defiance, the ultimate challenge. And now, the answer was coming. Not from a distant, weak bureaucracy, but from the hardest soldier the empire had left, Emperor Aurelian. And he was not coming to negotiate. He was coming to erase her from history. Welcome back to The Past Unfolded. This is the point in our story where history stops being a political drama and becomes an epic. This is Part 3, the inevitable, brutal collision between two absolute forces of will. On one side, Aurelian, the restorer of the world, a man who had spent his life battling barbarians and usurpers, now tasked with crushing the greatest threat to a unified Rome. On the other, Zenobia, the scholar queen, who had gambled everything and now had to defend her dream against the full, unforgiving might of the legions. The fate of two empires was about to be decided by the sword. Aurelian moved with a speed and efficiency that stunned the ancient world. His legions were veterans, hardened by years of civil war. They were not the complacent garrison troops the Palmyrenes were used to. They were the best of Rome, and they were coming for blood. Zenobia's strategy was one of defense in depth. She would not meet this juggernaut head-on. Instead, she ordered her generals to slow him down, harass his supply lines, force him to siege every town, fight for every mile of scorched earth. She would let the vast, arid landscape of Anatolia itself bleed his army dry. But Aurelian would not be slowed. He smashed through the first Palmyrene defenses, then the second. Town after town fell before his relentless advance. He was a force of nature. The two armies finally met in open battle near the town of Emesa. Zenobia's greatest weapon was her legendary heavy cavalry, the Clibanarii. Warriors and horses, both encased in full chainmail, an unstoppable hammer of steel. They charged, and it was a terrifying sight. They smashed into Aurelian's lines, and it seemed they might break through. The Roman infantry appeared to waver, and then they broke. They turned and ran, seemingly in a full panicked retreat. The Palmyrenes, believing victory was at hand, gave chase. Their tight formation dissolved into a disorganized mob, hungry for the kill. It was a trap. Aurelian, a master tactician, had anticipated everything. His retreat was a feint, a masterpiece of deception. His men weren't panicked, they were executing a flawless maneuver. The Palmyrene cavalry, weighed down by their heavy armor and exhausted from the chase and the eastern sun, were now completely vulnerable. Aurelian's fresh reserves, who had been held back, now slammed into their flanks. It was a slaughter. The pride of Zenobia's army was cut to pieces on the plains of Anatolia. Zenobia and her general, Zabdas, managed a fighting retreat, falling back to the fortified city of Emesa. But the shock of the defeat must have been seismic. For the first time, Zenobia faced a commander who was not just her equal, but her superior on the battlefield. The world was closing in. Aurelian's army, flush with victory, laid siege to Emesa. Inside the walls, Zenobia was cornered, but far from broken. She rallied her remaining forces for one last, desperate stand. The ensuing battle was even fiercer than the first. Again, the Palmyrene cavalry charged. Again, the fighting was brutal. But something happened. Historical accounts are murky. Some say the local populace turned on the Palmyrenes. Others say Aurelian's lighter, faster cavalry outmaneuvered them once more. The result was the same: another devastating defeat. Zenobia's army was shattered, with her army destroyed, her hope of military victory gone. Zenobia made one last, calculated decision: survival. Under the cover of night, she fled Emesa. She abandoned everything and made a desperate dash across hundreds of miles of barren desert. Her goal? Reach the safety of Palmyra's immense walls. If she could just get behind those stones, she could hold out. She could rally her people. She could sue for peace from a position of strength. She had to believe that the desert, her ancient ally, would protect her one last time. Back in his camp, Aurelian received the news. The queen had fled. And he did what Rome always did best. He did not panic. He did not despair. He organized. He dispatched his fastest, most experienced light cavalry, the very best of his equities promoti, with one simple, brutal order: hunt her down. Imagine her exhaustion, the taste of sand and defeat, the burning sun, the hope of seeing her city's towers on the horizon. And then, the sound of hooves behind her, not just any hooves, the disciplined, relentless pace of Roman cavalry. She was so close, but Aurelian's hunters were faster. In our final chapter, the dream ends. The queen is captured, the empire strikes back with terrifying force. We ask the haunting question: what becomes of a woman who dared to challenge a god? The answer is more shocking and more human than you can imagine. She was so close to home. The towers of Palmyra were almost within sight. After the crushing defeats, after the desperate flight across hundreds of miles of desert, Queen Zenobia must have allowed herself a sliver of hope. But history has a cruel sense of irony. On the banks of the Euphrates River, the very lifeblood of her kingdom, the dream ended. Aurelian's cavalry closed in. There was no final, glorious battle, no last stand, just the exhausted surrender of a queen who had run out of desert. She was captured, taken alive. The ruler of the East was now a prisoner of war. This is the story we often don't get: the aftermath. What happens after the epic battles, when the dust settles and the victor writes the history? This is the final chapter of Zenobia's story, a chapter about resilience, about the brutal cost of defiance, and about a legacy that refused to die, even in chains. Aurelian marched his prized captive to the very gates of her city. He paraded her before the walls, a calculated act of psychological warfare designed to break the spirit of the Palmyrens. His message was clear: your queen is mine. Your defiance is over. Open the gates. But the people of Palmyra, in a final act of breathtaking courage, refused. They defied the Roman Empire to save their queen's honor. They shut the gates. Aurelian's patience, never his strong suit, vanished. He laid siege to the city he had once hoped to take through negotiation, and when Palmyra fell, the retribution was swift and terrible. The legionaries were unleashed. The glorious city was sacked. Its wealth was plundered, its famous statues defaced, and its walls torn down. The Venice of the sands was left a smoking, broken husk. It was a punishment meant to be a lesson for all of history. This is what happens when you challenge Rome. And what of the queen? Zenobia was forced to embark on the longest, most humiliating journey imaginable. She was walked over 4,000 miles, from the deserts of Syria to the very heart of the empire she had threatened, Rome itself. She was to be the star attraction in Emperor Aurelian's triumph, the ultimate victory parade where defeated kings and conquered treasure were paraded through the streets for the mob to jeer at. We have to imagine her during that year-long march. The scholar, the general, the empress, now in chains. What was she thinking? Was it all worth it? The day of the triumph arrived. The sun glinted off Aurelian's chariot. The crowd screamed with delight at the exotic spoils of the East. And then came Zenobia. Ancient historians write that she was not dressed as a ragged prisoner, but adorned with breathtaking jewels and robes of royal purple, and bound with fetters of solid gold so massive she could scarcely move under their weight. This was not an act of mercy. It was the ultimate propaganda. Aurelian wasn't parading a broken woman. He was parading a conquered god. His power was so absolute, he could even chain a queen of the East in gold and gems. But then, the story does something remarkable. It twists. After the parade, the narrative shifts. The bloodthirsty conqueror Aurelian spares her. He doesn't execute her, as was the fate of so many captured enemies. He reportedly granted her a comfortable exile at a villa near Rome. Why? Why let the woman who almost destroyed his empire live? Some say he admired her spirit. Some say it was more practical. Executing such a formidable woman would have made her a martyr. But the ancient sources hint at something else. They say Zenobia, the brilliant strategist to the very end, knew exactly how to save her life. She reportedly told Aurelian that her rebellion wasn't her idea. She blamed her advisors. She reinvented herself one last time, from a fearsome rival into a manipulated woman who could be pardoned. She gave him a story he could accept. She used her wit to survive her own legend. So what is the truth of Zenobia? Was she a failure? A cautionary tale? Absolutely not. She was a woman who, for a brief, brilliant moment, looked at the entire world order and said, "Why not me?" She wasn't born to the purple of Rome. She took it. She wasn't given power. She seized it through sheer force of intellect and will. She gave Rome the fright of its life and proved that its power had limits. Her story is a testament to what ambition looks like when it is utterly free from the constraints of expectation. Rome tried to erase her. They sacked her city and paraded her in chains, hoping she would become a footnote. But they failed, because stories of true courage and defiance are indestructible. They echo through time. They remind us that history isn't just a record of what happened. It's a collection of choices, of dreams, and of people who dared to reach for the impossible. If you've been captivated by the story of the queen who defied Rome, then you know this is exactly the kind of story we live for here at The Past Unfolded. We dedicated significant time and research to bringing her tale to you, because we believe these hidden figures deserve to be remembered. And if you want to help us keep uncovering them, there are 3 things you can do that make a real difference. First, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into a forgotten history. Second, like this video. It tells the algorithm that you want more content like this. And third, and most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. Who else defied Rome? Who are the forgotten figures you want us to cover next? This channel is a conversation, and we want to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about the stories that shaped our world. Until next time, keep questioning the history you think you know.